Coffee Break. Thoughtful conversations for a busy world. Let's begin.
At some point in your life, someone looked at you and handed you a poisoned apple disguised as a compliment.
Oh, yeah. The absolute worst kind of compliment.
Right. They looked you dead in the eye, probably with the best of intentions, and told you, you have so much potential.
Yep. It's a heavy thing to hear.
It really is. Today, we're going to look at the psychological data that suggests why that single word potential is likely the exact thing destroying your ability to be happy right now.
Which sounds intense, but it's true.
If you are a lifelong learner, someone who's always been driven by curiosity and ambition, I suspect you have a deeply complicated relationship with that word.
Oh, absolutely. Because it sounds like a gift, right?
Exactly. It sounds like a gift. But if we actually break down the mechanics of how we live our lives, it functions more like a threat.
It functions as a threat because we fundamentally misunderstand what potential actually is. I mean, society treats potential as this static resource.
Like a gold mine or something.
Right? Like an untapped well of future greatness.
Yeah.
That you're supposed to be constantly mining. We're taught that as long as we keep digging, we'll eventually strike gold.
And we'll become the idealized versions of ourselves.
Exactly. But the psychological reality is much darker than that. Because when your cognitive energy is entirely consumed by mining for this hypothetical future value, well, the present moment becomes an empty, hollow place.
You essentially vacate your own life.
You do. You completely vacate it.
And that cognitive vacancy brings us to the source material for this deep dive. Normally, we bring a massive stack of articles and data sets and research papers to the table to synthesize a broad topic.
That usually have a mountain of reading.
We do. But today, we are dedicating this entire deep dive to unpacking one solitary text. It's an excerpt from a piece titled The Haunting Presence of Unseen Potential.
Such a good title.
It really is. In fact, we're going to spend our time today entirely consumed by one singular, incredibly poignant sentence from that text.
Just one sentence.
Just one. But I promise you, this one sentence contains enough psychological and neurological weight to keep us analyzing our own behaviors for hours.
It is a kind of sentence that forces a complete paradigm shift.
Yeah.
I mean, once you hear it, it just unspools your understanding of your own life trajectory.
Yeah, it totally reorients you.
It forces you to look at the gap between who you thought you would be, who you actually are. And not as a failure, but as an active, ongoing psychological event.
Which is a huge distinction. So our mission today is to perform a forensic, philosophical, and neurological unpacking of this text.
We really need to understand the machinery behind this specific phantom. Like, how does the promise of who we could be transform into a specter that degrades the person we actually are right now?
Right. So here's the quote. This is the central anchor for everything we're going to explore today. Quote, "Your potential is a ghost that's haunting your reality."
Wow.
Yeah. Let that land for a second for you listening. Your potential is a ghost that's haunting your reality.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Because before we can talk about the mechanics of a haunting, we really need to understand what this ghost is even made of. Let's look at the title of that source piece again. The Haunting Presence of Unseen Potential.
It's that word unseen that requires some immediate dissection.
Exactly. What are we actually talking about when we say unseen?
Well, unseen is the crucial operating variable here. Why is it unseen? Because it never materialized into the physical, observable world.
It's basically imaginary.
It exists entirely in the realm of the hypothetical. It's constructed from imagination, from, societal expectations, and from projections passed on to you by parents, teachers, peers, everyone in your past.
So it isn't real, but it feels real.
Right. It has no mass, no physical footprint, and yet it exerts this massive gravitational pull on your psyche.
It's the novel you never wrote.
Yes.
Or like the startup you never founded. It's the specific idealized version of your life that simply didn't happen.
And it's invisible to everyone else walking down the street.
But to you, it feels heavier than a physical weight. But I mean, biologically speaking, how does that work? Let me push back on the metaphor of a ghost for a moment, just to get to the root of the science here.
Sure, go for it.
Because a ghost implies that something died. But if the potential never materialized, it never actually lived. So what exactly died in the brain to leave this phantom behind? Aren't ghosts supposed to be the spirits of things that were once alive?
That is a great question. To answer that, we really have to look at how the brain actually processes the future.
Okay.
What's fascinating here is the mechanism of predictive coding. The human brain is essentially locked inside a dark box, your skull.
Right. It can't see anything directly.
Exactly. It doesn't perceive reality directly. It constantly generates hypotheses about what is going to happen next based on past data, and then it checks those guesses against sensory input.
So it's a prediction machine.
A constant prediction machine. And when it comes to your life trajectory, your brain literally wires physical neural pathways to support the future it expects. So the future itself wasn't physically alive, no.
But the expectation was?
Yes, the expectation was biologically alive.
Wow. So the expectation had an actual physical footprint in the brain.
It did. The vision of who you were going to become was so vivid and so continuously reinforced by your environment that your brain built its identity structure around it.
It built dopamine systems around it.
Exactly. Its dopamine reward systems, its daily habits, all built around the absolute certainty that this potential would become real. It allocated neurological real estate to a future that hadn't arrived yet.
So the expectation was a living, breathing network of synapses. That makes so much sense.
And when reality diverged from that plan, like when you didn't get into that specific university or the career path shifted.
Or you simply woke up one day and realized you didn't want the life you had been preparing for.
Right. When that happens, that specific neural network of expectation is essentially starved of validation. Its death created the psychological specter.
And this is where the haunting begins.
This is exactly where it begins.
So if the brain creates this phantom expectation, what happens neurologically when that expectation isn't met? I mean, the brain doesn't just delete the file, right?
No, it definitely doesn't just delete it. It creates a friction loop.
And that friction is what the author means when they say it is haunting your reality. Now, I've heard this compared to phantom limb syndrome in amputees, but does that analogy actually hold up under neurological scrutiny?
Well, the phantom limb analogy gets us halfway there, but it actually breaks down in one terrifying way when we apply it to potential.
Terrifying. How so?
With phantom limb syndrome, a person loses an arm, but their brain's somatosensory cortex still has a map of that arm. The brain fires signals, expecting feedback, and when it gets none, it interprets that absence as a sensation.
Like an itch or a pain in a hand that isn't there?
Exactly. Over time, however, the brain's neuroplasticity usually kicks in. It remaps itself. The phantom limb eventually fades as the brain accepts the new physical reality.
But the ghost of unseen potential does the opposite.
It does the exact opposite. If left unexamined, the ghost of potential actually grows larger and more demanding as you age.
Because it's an idea, not a physical thing.
Right. Because unlike a missing arm, which is an undeniable physical fact that the brain must eventually accept, unseen potential is an abstraction. Your brain can always convince itself that the potential is still out there, just delayed.
So it never gives up.
It never initiates the remapping process. It just keeps sending signals to a future that doesn't exist, generating a massive amount of cognitive friction.
And that friction brings us to the actual mechanics of the haunting. The text says this ghost is haunting your reality. So, I mean, on a Thursday night, when you are just sitting on your couch, how does this cognitive friction actually manifest?
How does the ghost interact with us?
Yeah, exactly. What does it feel like?
It manifests as an ambiguous loss. It generates this perpetual low-grade cortisol drip in your system.
Just a constant stress response.
Yes. We spend our cognitive energy mourning the idealized person we could have been. And because we are constantly running that background process of grief, we become blind to the reality of the person we actually are.
We need to define ambiguous loss here because I think that is the hidden engine driving so much modern anxiety. When we think of mourning, we usually think of concrete loss.
Right. Traditional concrete loss completes a stress cycle in the brain because there is a physical finality to it.
Like a definitive ending.
Exactly. If a loved one passes away, or you lose a job, or your house burns down, the brain recognizes the event as absolute. Furthermore, society recognizes it.
We have rituals for those things.
We do. We hold funerals, we print obituaries, neighbors bring casseroles, employers give you bereavement leave. The brain registers the beginning, the middle, and the end of the loss event.
Yeah. But mourning unseen potential lacks all of that architecture. It is completely invisible. You don't get a casserole for not becoming a CEO.
No, you don't. Ambiguous loss is dangerous precisely because the brain's pattern recognition software cannot find the end of the event.
There is no funeral for the career you didn't pursue.
And there is no casserole for the version of yourself that would have been a concert pianist. Because there is no finality, the brain thinks the loss is still actively happening.
So it just stays in crisis mode.
Cortisol, the stress hormone, keeps dripping into your system because your body believes it is in a state of chronic, unresolved failure.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to ground this in the most mundane reality possible. Let's move away from the abstract and look at a specific, relatable micro scenario.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you were standing in your kitchen on a Tuesday evening. You are cooking pasta. It is a perfectly fine, functional evening. Your bills are paid, you are healthy, you are safe.
Sounds like a good night.
Right, but your brain's expectation engine is running a split screen in your consciousness.
Ah, the comparison machine at work.
Exactly. On the right side of the screen is your actual reality stirring boiling water, wearing sweatpants, listening to a deep dive, maybe feeling a little tired from a normal workday. It is deeply human and deeply ordinary.
And what's on the left screen?
On the left side of the screen is the ghost. The ghost you is currently giving a keynote speech at a major conference, or, I don't know, drinking wine in a villa in Tuscany, or signing a book deal.
Always something glamorous.
Always. The ghost you has perfect skin, boundless energy, and never experiences mundane fatigue.
Because the ghost only exists in the imagination, it is completely unconstrained by the laws of physics or time or biology. It is flawless.
So because the human brain is fundamentally a comparison machine, it evaluates the right screen, the pasta against the left screen, the flawless ghost, and the pasta loses.
Every single time.
It floods your system with cortisol, reading your perfectly fine, safe, functional kitchen as a failure state, simply because it does not match the impossible metrics of the ghost screen.
And that failure state prevents you from actually inhabiting the kitchen. You can't even taste the food. You can't enjoy the quiet evening. The ghost demand all of your cognitive attention.
It's awful.
We can think of this as a haunted house, but not in the cinematic sense of jump scares. Think of it as a house you work your entire life to buy.
Okay, I like this analogy.
You get the keys, you walk in, and it's your actual life. But on the very first night, you see a manifestation of the ghost, a shadow at the end of the second floor hallway.
And human nature dictates that we fixate on the anomaly.
We pull up a chair at the end of the hallway, and we sit there 24 hours a day staring at the shadow of our potential. We are terrified of it, but we are obsessed with it.
We're constantly checking on it.
You're trying to negotiate with it. And while we are sitting in the hallway, staring at the ghost, what is happening to the rest of the house?
It's falling apart.
The groceries are rotting in the fridge downstairs. The fireplace in the living room remains unlit. The garden is dying. The ghost hasn't physically touched you, but it has completely stolen the real estate of your present life.
Your reality goes to waste because your attention is locked on the phantom. And that neglect creates a secondary layer of guilt, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
You feel bad that your actual life is falling apart, which makes the ghost seem even more judgmental, which keeps you glued to the chair in the hallway. It is an incredibly vicious cycle.
It is a self-sustaining loop of cognitive friction. And while everyone experiences this to some degree, the severity of the haunting is not distributed equally.
Right. Some ghosts are bigger than others.
The size of the ghost is directly proportional to the amount of potential you were assigned in the past.
Which means we need to talk about the demographic that has the most aggressive, terrifying ghosts in their hallways.
Yes, we do.
If we are analyzing the source text assertion that potential is a haunting presence, we have to examine the phenomenon of the gifted child and the intense, paralyzing burnout that inevitably follows them into adulthood.
If we are looking for ground zero of this specific psychological haunting, the former gifted child is the perfect case study.
The absolute perfect example.
But we need to define gifted carefully here, because it is a loaded systemic term.
Yeah.
We are not just talking about children who displayed natural intelligence or curiosity.
Right. We are talking about a specific educational and systemic ladling process. We are talking about the kids who were pulled out of regular classes in the second grade,
The ones who were separated.
the ones who were given specialized tests, placed in separate reading groups, and handed a very specific narrative by the authority figures in their lives.
Historically gifted and talented programs, especially as they expanded in the 1980s and 90s, operated on a model of identifying early outliers and separating them.
And what does that do to a kid?
When a child is placed in that system, they are subjected to a magnified version of the Pygmalion effect.
The Pygmalion effect. Let's break that down.
The Pygmalion effect is a psychological phenomenon where high expectations lead directly to improved performance in a given area.
So if you expect greatness, you get greatness.
Generally, yes. The adults expect the child to be exceptional, so they provide more resources, more attention, and more validation, which causes the child to perform exceptionally.
Which sounds great on paper. I mean, it sounds like nurturing.
It sounds like nurturing until you look at the neurological toll it takes on a developing brain. A child in this system is essentially handed a massive, incredibly heavy backpack.
A backpack full of what?
And that backpack is stuffed to the brim with other people's expectations of their future. Because their potential is highly visible and constantly praised, the child's dopamine reward system becomes entirely tethered to academic validation and adult approval.
And at 7 years old, you don't realize the backpack is heavy. You just think it's a prize.
You wear it proudly.
Yeah, because it is your entire source of identity.
The trap is that the praise the child receives is rarely for who they are in that moment. The praise is an advance payment on who the child is supposed to become.
Oh, wow. An advance payment.
The adults are inadvertently saying, I am giving you this validation now on the assumption that you will cash it in for extraordinary achievements later.
You are going to cure cancer. You are going to be president. You are going to change the world.
Exactly. Therefore, the child internalizes a deeply warped equation. My current worth is entirely dependent on my future output.
That is so much pressure.
They experience a phenomenon known as identity foreclosure. They commit to an identity, the exceptional achiever, without ever having the chance to explore other facets of themselves.
They just get locked in.
Their entire ego structure is built on a scaffolding of future potential.
Which sets the stage for a catastrophic collapse when the future actually arrives, because statistically, the vast majority of gifted children do not become globe-trotting billionaires or Nobel laureates.
No, they don't. They become normal adults.
They grow up, they go to college, where suddenly everyone else is also smart, and the bell curve reasserts itself. They enter the workforce. They become normal adults with normal jobs, paying normal taxes, dealing with normal relationship issues.
And the moment that normal reality solidifies, the moment their life settles into something finite and human, the massive expectation in that backpack dies.
Because reality doesn't match the fantasy.
Because the expectation was so bloated and so intertwined with their core identity, the ghost it leaves behind is terrifyingly huge.
We hear the term gifted child burnout thrown around constantly on social media, but I think our cultural definition of burnout is way too shallow.
How do you mean?
Well, we usually frame burnout as a symptom of overwork. You know, answering too many emails, hustling too hard in a capitalist system, physical exhaustion.
Right, the typical grind.
But reading this source text, it shifts the definition entirely. Burnout, for the former gifted child, isn't just about the volume of work. It is the sheer spiritual exhaustion of constantly running from the ghost of their own unseen potential.
It is the exhaustion of cognitive dissonance. They are doing two jobs simultaneously. They are trying to navigate the physical demands of their actual life, and they are constantly managing the devastating disappointment of the ghost standing in the corner of the room, whispering that they are a fraud.
Just whispering you failed all day long.
The burnout is the physiological result of that endless dopamine withdrawal. The validation they were wired to receive is gone, replaced by chronic cortisol from the haunting.
Okay, let me ask a really provocative question here, because I'm struggling to see this purely as a passive experience.
Okay, let's hear it.
I want to push back on the idea that we are just helpless victims of this haunting. What if there is an active self-directed element to this burnout?
Like self-sabotage.
Exactly. Are we, on some subconscious level, actively sabotaging our reality because we feel guilty that we didn't become the ghost? Is gifted child burnout actually just a prolonged apology to the person we didn't become?
Oh, that's fascinating. If we connect this to the bigger picture of how guilt operates in the human psyche, that is a profound insight.
It feels like guilt has to play a role.
Guilt is a tremendous, often unrecognized driver of self-sabotage.
Yeah.
When a child ties their entire self-worth to a promised future, and that future fails to materialize, they do not just feel like they changed their mind or altered their path.
How do they feel?
They feel like they broke a fundamental contract with the universe.
They feel like they owe a debt they cannot pay.
Exactly. The feeling of being a fraud stems from the belief that they accepted all that early validation under false pretenses.
Like they stole the praise.
So, to alleviate that immense subconscious guilt, they punish themselves. They burn themselves out. They refuse to allow themselves to be happy or content in their normal reality because being happy in an ordinary life feels like a betrayal of their extraordinary potential.
Wow. So the haunting becomes a daily reminder of a perceived failure, And the burnout is the penance they pay.
It's a way of suffering to make up for the failure.
They stare at the shadow in the hallway because they feel they don't deserve to go downstairs and enjoy cooking in the kitchen.
It is a self-imposed purgatory. We construct the haunted house, we furnish it with our past accolades, our old report cards, our abandoned ambitions, and then we trap ourselves inside with the phantom.
It's so tragic.
And the most tragic part of this psychological mechanism is that we actively defend the ghost.
Wait, we defend our own haunting. Why would we do that?
We protect it fiercely. If a friend or a therapist tries to tell a burned-out, former gifted kid, hey, your life is actually objectively good, you have a stable job, people love you, you are safe, they will often aggressively argue back.
They'll fight you on it.
They will point to the ghost and say, no, you don't understand. Look at what I could have been. Look at what I was supposed to be. I am failing.
Why do we do that? Why do we fight for the very thing that is torturing us?
Because the ghost, as painful and demanding as it is the last remaining connection to that childhood feeling of being special.
Oh, that makes sense. It's the only proof left.
It is the only proof that they ever had the potential in the first place. If they let the ghost go, they have to face the terrifying vulnerability of admitting that they are just regular.
And for someone wired like that, being regular is terrifying.
When your entire neurological reward system was built on being exceptional, being regular feels akin to ego death.
Which brings us to a massive pivot point in this conversation. Because we've diagnosed the dopamine withdrawal, we've mapped the cortisol loops, and we've walked through the haunted house.
We've covered the pathology, yeah.
But we cannot just leave our listeners trapped in the hallway. I mean, a diagnosis is not a cure. Eventually, you have to figure out how to rewrite the brain's predictive coding to accept reality.
You have to find a way out.
We have to transition from analyzing the haunting to the prescription for moving forward. So how do we actually exorcise this phantom?
Well, exercising this kind of phantom cannot be a passive process. It requires a very deliberate, conscious intervention to override the brain's default comparison machine.
It takes actual work.
You have to embark on a formal process of letting go. But letting go is a terrible phrase because it sounds passive, like just dropping a balloon.
Right, like it's easy.
In reality, letting go of unseen potential is an active, agonizing process of grieving. You have to formally bury the potential.
You have to declare it dead.
You have to declare the hypothetical future dead, not as a tragedy, but as a necessary biological step to free up the cognitive energy required to become the person you actually are.
So what does this all mean in practice? How do we physically and mentally enact this burial? Let's ground this in a biological analogy that actually deals with living systems.
Okay, I like biological analogies.
I'm thinking about the practice of pruning a tree. If you look at the biology of a tree, it naturally produces growth hormones, like auxin, that encourage it to grow in a million different directions.
It wants to spread out.
It has the potential to push out branches everywhere.
The tree wants to expand infinitely to maximize its surface area for sunlight.
Right. But if an arborist lets a tree grow, every single branch it has the potential to grow, the tree will actually become fundamentally weak.
It overextends itself.
Exactly. The canopy becomes too dense, the sunlight cannot penetrate to the center, the air circulation drops, which invites disease, and the structural integrity of the trunk is compromised by the scattered weight.
A tree that tries to fulfill all of its potential will literally collapse under its own unmanaged weight.
The energy is too diffused to sustain stability.
So what does a master gardener do?
They prune. They take sharp shears and they brutally cut off branches. And here is the key detail. They are not just cutting off dead wood. They cut off perfectly healthy, vibrant branches.
They cut off the possibilities.
They cut off the phantom branches of how the tree could have grown. They do not do this because they hate the tree or because the tree is a failure for wanting to grow.
They do it so the tree can survive and thrive.
Yes. By severing the infinite possibilities, all the water, all the sap, all the biological energy of the tree is forced back into the trunk and the branches that remain.
It consolidates the energy.
The tree becomes strong and resilient in its actual shape, rather than fragile and weak in its potential shape.
That is perhaps the most accurate metaphor for the psychological exorcism we are talking about. Pruning the tree is an act of radical acceptance.
It really is.
You have to look at the infinite, flawless ghost of your potential, and you have to take the shears to it. You have to say, I could have been a lawyer. I could have moved to Paris. I could have been a CEO.
And snip those branches.
Snipping those branches hurts. It is a genuine loss, and it requires real mourning. But severing those neural pathways of expectation forces your cognitive life force back into the trunk of your actual present existence.
Moving forward isn't about giving up your ambition. It isn't about settling.
Not at all.
It's about confining your ambition to the reality you actually inhabit. It's about accepting the physics of human existence. Potential is infinite and flawless, while reality is finite and flawed.
And the ultimate revelation is that finite and flawed is infinitely better because it is the only thing that actually exists.
You cannot live in a hypothetical.
This raises an important question, and it is one that I want to pose directly to the listener as they consider the architecture of their own mind.
I think they need to hear this.
If you are listening to this and recognizing the shadow in your own hallway, the split screen in your own kitchen, what would it look like to view your current life, your actual reality, without the ghost of potential standing right next to it, serving as a metric for failure?
Think about the physical sensation of that. What happens to your heart rate when the left side of the screen just goes blank?
If you remove the ghost of the brilliant novelist you didn't become, how does your current quiet hobby of writing in a journal actually feel?
It probably feels pretty good.
If you remove the ghost of the perfect, conflict-free cinematic romance you imagined at 20, how does your current, messy, human, deeply loyal partnership look?
It looks beautiful.
When you stop comparing your reality to a phantom that defies the laws of physics, you suddenly realize that your reality has its own immense inherent value. The kitchen in the haunted house is actually a really lovely place to cook once you stop staring at the shadow upstairs.
And we have to be clear that this isn't an overnight fix. You don't just put down the shears and say, great, I'm pruned, the neural pathways are remapped, I'm cured.
Oh, definitely not. It's an ongoing effort.
It is an active, daily somatic practice. The comparison machine will always try to reboot itself.
Always. Every time you scroll through social media and feel that sharp chemical pang of jealousy looking at someone else's highlight reel, that is the ghost trying to re-enter the house.
Every single time.
Every time you hesitate to start a new hobby because you know you won't be world-class at it immediately, that is the ghost demanding perfection.
Exercising the phantom is a daily choice to say, no, I am choosing the messy reality over the pristine fantasy.
It is the conscious, repeated shift from what if to what is.
The ghost only knows what if.
Right. It lives in the subjunctive mood. Your physical body, your actual life, your nervous system only exists in the indicative mood. It only exists in what is.
As we start to pull the threads of this deep dive together, I want to trace the massive journey we've been on today. We started with one single, incredibly dense sentence from the haunting presence of unseen potential.
Your potential is a ghost that's haunting your reality.
And we broke down the neurological machinery behind that sentence. We explored how unseen potential isn't just a missed abstract opportunity. It is an expired biological expectation.
It is a phantom limb of a future that your brain wired itself to expect through predictive coding and is now misfiring because that future never arrived.
We talked about the mechanics of the haunting, how it traps us in a state of ambiguous loss, how we get stuck in a haunted house of our own making, staring at the flawless shadows of who we could have been, while the beautiful, messy reality of our actual lives rots on the kitchen counter.
We explored the split screen of the comparison machine and the cortisol drip of perceived failure.
We specifically drilled down into the gifted child phenomenon, examining how the Pygmalion effect and early identity foreclosure create the most aggressive ghosts.
We reframed burnout entirely.
Yeah, it is not simply the exhaustion of overwork, but the spiritual and physiological exhaustion of constantly apologizing to the phantom of your unfulfilled promise.
We looked at how guilt drives self-sabotage, trapping us in a purgatory of our own design.
And finally, we talked about the exorcism. The absolute necessity of pruning the tree, the radical, sometimes painful acceptance of taking shears to the flawless, infinite branches of what if, so that the finite, flawed, but fiercely real trunk of what is can actually thrive.
I think the most vital takeaway for you, listening right now, is that recognizing the mechanics of this ghost is the very first step to reclaiming your cognitive real estate.
The goal of this deep dive is not to convince you to abandon ambition, or to stop learning, or to settle for less than you desire.
The goal is to fundamentally change the origin point of your ambition. We want you to strive from a deeply rooted place of present reality rather than running frantically from a phantom of the past.
You can still build a beautiful house. You can still grow a massive tree. But you have to build it in the real world, subject to gravity and time and human limitation, not in the graveyard of your past potential.
It is about giving yourself permission to inhabit your own physical life, fully, without the constant suffocating supervision of a ghost.
And so I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. A scenario to mull over long after the audio stops today as you go about your normal human day.
You have heard the diagnosis, you understand the neurology of the haunting.
So ask yourself this. If you woke up tomorrow morning and the ghost of your unseen potential had completely vanished, if the hallway was empty, the split screen was turned off, and the heavy backpack of expectations was entirely gone, who is the very real person left standing there, and what do they actually want to do today?
Thanks for spending this time with us on Coffee Break. If this conversation stayed with you, you can find more episodes here on the channel. Until next time, take care.